Hey, beautiful souls and creative minds. Welcome to the Artist Stoop, the podcast where we turn the art world into your personal playground. I'm Jillian Zapata, your host, and I can't wait to dive into the art world with you. Each episode will be kicking it with an incredible artist, unraveling their stories and turning the spotlight on the magic that happens beyond the brush. Get ready to discover new perspectives, forge connections, and immerse yourself one captivating conversation at a time. So grab your favorite beverage, maybe a sketchbook, and let's jump into the kaleidoscope of creativity together. This is the Artist Stoop, where art isn't just a thing you see, it's an experience you feel. Everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Artist Stoop. Today, I'm thrilled to have Zac Chambers on the show, a creative force with an insatiable appetite for life's adventures. Raised in a bustling household of eight, we're going to have to dive into that, eight kids, Zac has journeyed through 49 states and 28 countries, mastering 7 instruments and exploring diverse artistic endeavors through photography and painting. Drawing inspiration from Mexican culture, Japanese textiles, and classical jazz, Zac brings a unique blend of creativity to his work, whether it's through art, music, or fashion. So join us today as we dive into Zac's fascinating stories and insights, offering glimpses into his captivating world of travel, style, and cultural exploration. So welcome to the podcast today, Zac.
Thanks, Jillian. I am excited to be here.
I know. You and I connected very quickly, like last week. Was it just last week? It
was
like
a few days ago.
a few days ago. Like this friendship happened very quickly.
100%.
So you said you reached out because you met Steph Shock at the other art fair, and then you heard her episode, and then you met me, and then you started following me, and then I started following you, and I went, oh, his cool stuff is cool, and then I messaged you, say, hey, do you want to be on? And then you're like, yeah, let's do it, and here we are.
Yeah, I guess it's a total like friendship story in the digital era where you do a podcast before you actually hang out. So. Yeah, I mean, I'm pumped to be here. Yeah, met through Steph, I guess, was the technical link. Steph's super cool. Her art's awesome. And I just saw her story and I was like, all right, who's this chick and why is she doing these art podcasts? So I'm honored to be here and appreciate you inviting me to be on.
Yeah, no, first of all, I saw the photos of your fashion and your traveling and your really cool hat. And then as I was scrolling, and then I saw your artwork and I was like, oh, I have to hear more. Because there's something, as I do, I Instagram stalk people, before I invite them onto the podcast.
Same. I think we all do.
I think we all do that Instagram stalking, website stalking.
Totally.
And, you have a lot of the Mexican culture, you have the fashion, you have this really unique way of approaching your art. And I was like, I need to hear more about it. And I need to find out more about, what and why you create. So, first of all, I need to know, how was it growing up with being one of 8 children? I need to know.
The short answer is it was like absolute chaos. And I guess I enjoy that. So I think life is wild. And so I learned that from a young age, having 7 siblings. So there's 7 boys and 1 girl, and she's actually the youngest. So essentially we're all the byproduct of trying for a girl. And so the ages range from now, I guess it's like 29 to 43. And we're all like kind of a year and a half to 2.5 years apart. From the next one. So it's all pretty close in age too. But I mean, it was the kind of environment where I'm 6th out of the 8.
Yeah, I was like, where do you fall in the line?
Yeah, sometimes I forget. No, we just at my house, my mom would just look at us and she'd say 5 names before she got our name right. Because it's just so many of us. And then we always had a million friends over. There was always music playing. There was always just a crowd to eat at our house.
Yeah.
So I loved it. I mean, my mom was like pretty big into like not letting us use a ton of technology as kids. So like we didn't have a TV for the majority of my childhood, and she would like basically throw a soccer ball out the back door and be like, "Guys, don't come in for like 4 hours." And we're like, "All right, cool." So then it'd be like the Chambers family versus the neighborhood in soccer or football or whatever. So no, it was fun though. It never a dull moment.
And where did you grow up? Did you grow up here in Dallas?
So I was actually born in Bristol, Tennessee.
Okay.
Lived in Tennessee, lived in Texas, most of my life in Florida. And then kind of young adult life, lived in New York for a while, lived in Charleston, South Carolina for a while, and then Austin, Mexico City, kind of all over. So my life has never really been consistently in one place, but I
I
guess
think it
it's fun.
reflects that childhood, that need for chaos and moving, and it kind of is
A
part
hundred
of that.
percent. Because
Part
we
of that.
all love packing up boxes and moving, a million times. So
I've done that. I've done that. So
the
I hear
absolute worst.
at one point in my life, I had a Honda Civic. I could fit everything I owned in the Honda Civic.
You
I'm
probably had to
really
because as like young people, we weren't able to even afford moving trucks. So, yeah.
right. And I did, people, okay, sorry, side note. People, if you are moving cross country and you need to get from like East Coast to the West Coast and you are moving, here's the trick: ship your car. Put stuff in your car and ship your car. It is cheaper to ship it from point A to point B with your crap in it than it is to pay for moving boxes, and it is for driving to pay for the gas and hotels to get across the country. Just letting you
I
know.
feel like this needs to
PSA
be like
announcement.
your podcast sponsor. Do you have a company that you're thinking of?
For all you young people out there. No, I did.
That's
I moved
awesome.
from Oregon to Florida for a job at an animation studio, and I was like, and I did the math, um, of like how much gas I would need and how much that would cost, and then how much I was going to spend in on hotels and food, and then I looked up the price for shipping my car, and it was cheaper to ship my car,
That's a pro move right there. That's a pro move.
right? So there you go. Anyway, back to our original paid programming.
Right.
um so okay, I heard you say Mexico City. Why Mexico City?
Yeah. So basically, early on in the pandemic, I was living in New York City, and New York City during the pandemic was like pure chaos and was just really a difficult time because I think obviously everyone got kind of breaks from their jobs, whether they got laid off or they weren't able to do work from an office, or everyone was just kind of stuck at home for different reasons. And basically, with everything shut down, restaurants, even like in New York City, they were so serious they even shut down the parks. So you couldn't even go outdoors really. You were
Yeah,
confined to your super tiny apartment. So
I remember that.
uh, I at the time was working for a menswear brand called Buck Mason, and basically they were looking at opening a store in Austin, Texas. And so they basically moved me to Austin, Texas, which I was thrilled about because I was like, all right, Austin has a little more space. I can actually be outdoors, even though it was god awful hot as well. It was just like a nice switch up for a bit. So I helped them open up the store during the pandemic, which was actually pure chaos as well. But then after that, I think I needed like a break from the menswear industry and being in a physical storefront during a pandemic, and also just like artistically, I feel like I needed a refresh. And so my wife and I had visited Mexico City literally one time. My wife's Mexicana, and her family's from all over Mexico. She grew up between Texas and Monterrey in the north of Mexico.
Okay.
And so we had kind of explored all over Mexico together, but I had only visited Mexico City one time. And when we were there, we're like, dude, we got to move here at some point. And literally
It's
the next
cool.
time that we went there was us moving. And so, yeah, just needed a change of scenery. I felt like creatively I needed a bit of inspiration. Also, I'm just like, absolutely love the culture. The people are so kind. the food obviously is unreal. I definitely got out of shape when we moved to Mexico City. Um,
Tacos.
yeah, 100%, and a million other things. No, and I didn't realize that when we moved until we moved to Mexico City that it's like 7,000 feet elevation,
Hmm.
and so basically. I would climb like a flight of stairs and I'm like, dude, why am I so winded right now? Yeah, it like really affects you. So I had no idea.
Yeah, they get the they do get like the temperature change. They actually kind of get a little bit of like four seasons. The only reason I know this is because my dad's from Mexico City. My dad grew up in
Oh, no way.
Mexico. Yeah,
That's
and he
awesome.
moved to the States when he was 19. And then actually my husband is also from Mexico. He's actually from Chihuahua.
No way.
So like I'm a byproduct of my dad being from Mexico, my mom being from Oklahoma, but I grew up in the States and like so I don't know any like I know Spanish kind of like I can listen to it and understand, but I can't speak it. So like it's really interesting. But no, Mexico City, I've been there a couple times to visit family and it is beautiful. And the food is great. And the art scene is like really up and coming, like
Unbelievable.
really thriving right now.
Well, it's funny because like it, I think like it's just kind of made its premiere in like because of social media, but the truth is like it's crazy the art history all the way back from like pre-Columbian art and indigenous art, like absolutely beautiful ceramics, sculptures, paintings. That is a massive part of like my inspiration, and then you have this like Spanish colonial influx that kind of tweaked it and changed things up and brought a different vibe. And then you have like this modern push that was kind of from like the 20s on. You have all of a sudden this like modern architecture popping up and modern art. Like it's just this crazy clash of cultures. Um, but it's super cool. And the some of my favorite museums in the world are definitely in Mexico City.
Yeah, I haven't checked out. I honestly I haven't been to Mexico City since I was like 13, so it's been a hot second since I've been there. But like my family also lives. I have family that lives outside Mexico City, and I'm told probably sorry family, sorry any Spanish speaking people. I'm gonna probably butcher this, but oh, I have family living outside the city in a town called Querétaro.
Okay.
And have you been there?
Only because my flight got diverted. So I landed in Querétaro, and yeah, we were there for like only a few hours. But yeah, I haven't
They
experienced it.
have so my uncle lives there and he and I have and my grandmother and stuff and he's shown me photos, but that is also a very very thriving art community in Mexico right now. It's to the point where it's just like, okay, I got to get, all of our stuff situated so, we're trying to get back so we can go and visit. Um but yeah, it's
Yeah,
one of the places that I really want to go and check out artistically.
I mean, yeah, 100%. I mean, like for me, um, the a lot of the texture in my art is totally based off the walls around Mexico.
Okay,
Just like
cool.
this textured style kind of mix of colonial and indigenous Mexican style is like something that I try to mimic the best that I can because it's absolutely beautiful. And for all of my friends who like grew up in all these cities around Mexico, they're like they don't even like bat an eye at it. It's just normal. It's just what they grew up around. And
Yeah.
I'm over here like, guys, have you seen these walls? And I'm like trying to take photos of these walls, and they're like, what do you, bro? You need to stop looking at walls. Um,
You're like over there
yeah,
like petting it, like looking like, what is
yeah,
it?
100%. I'm like, this color though. Like, yeah, dude, it's on every street.
No, and what I love about your work has this uh obviously both your photography and your art is beautiful, but let's talk about your art for a second. So it has this simplicity to it, but it has all these in my sense when I look at it, I kind of see like this folklore um Mexicano kind of style imagery in it. And that's why I'm so drawn to it because it has a softness to it, a nice neutral palette. So tell us, like, when you're painting, like, how do you decide, like, okay, this painting's going to have XYZ imagery on it?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm grateful that you noticed like those qualities because that's definitely like a big focus for me. My and this like it's funny because my wife and I, basically my wife being Mexicana, like loves color, and I love color too, but I'm so like neutral and calm about color. Like if I'm gonna put like a more vibrant color, I'm gonna have the rest of the setting be completely neutral so that it highlights the color there. And she's just like, you hate color. Like I swear I don't hate color. I love color, but I just like I'm trying to like soften everything else around it to highlight it. But basically, I feel like I paint how I dress, and how I dress is like totally neutral tones, earth tones. I would always joke around because I'm like, you could go into my closet and you could pick any shirt and any pair of pants and it would always match. And it's like some combination of browns, beige, white, black, navy, maybe olive if I'm feeling crazy.
A nice
But basically,
khaki.
it's yeah, 100%. It's the same concept with my art. It's just like you could take, I would say 95% of them and interchange them next to each other, and they feel cohesive and they feel pairable, even if they're completely different styles or different colors. They're kind of complementary.
Mm-hmm.
And so on the color side, that's what I would say in terms of kind of the storylines. I feel I definitely feel really lucky to have stepped into kind of my wife's upbringing and her family. Her family is so special and just like the kindest, most hospitable people I've ever met. And from day one of like meeting them, basically around 6 or so years ago, when my Spanish felt like I wasn't near as confident. I was the gringo, and not only that, but I was the non-Catholic gringo stepping into the family. And so it was like I'm the first basically white guy on both sides of her family, and so it was just like at first I was like, who is this guy? And then I think like I've come to love, and I think that they've come to love me over the years. But her family, like her mom's from Monterrey in the north of Mexico, and then her dad is from Jalisco, like a little pueblo that's like a 2 or 3 hours outside of Guadalajara. And
Mm-hmm.
so we visited kind of both of their family sides a lot, and I got a lot of inspo visiting her dad's side in Jalisco. It's just like this town has like maybe a few thousand people in it, and her dad basically he's the oldest of 10, so another big family. And basically, he was pulled out of school when he was like 12 years old to basically work full time for the rest of his life to try to just put food on the table for their family.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's his story to me is a really tough story and also a really beautiful story. It's a very challenging upbringing, and you have this little kid who's, I don't know, not really experiencing childhood as we got to experience childhood.
Yeah.
But this guy who's unbelievably strong, who's just knows how to do everything, and not only does he work super hard, but him and his family know how to like party hard. They're like wild human beings, and if I'm ever hanging out with them, there is always like a shot of tequila and like a beer in the other hand. And if one hand like goes empty, they're like, Zach, refill. And I'm like it's a lot, but it is like a blast. But basically, some of these stories are like Jalisco is known for for tequila, in the city of tequila, and you have these unbelievably beautiful like agave fields, and these agave plants are, depending if they're like mezcal or tequila, they can be a couple feet tall all the way up to like 15 plus feet tall,
Oh,
like the
wow.
size of like a house. And so you're just driving through, and it's also one of those things like the walls in Mexico. They don't even realize, like, because they've grown up around it, it doesn't phase them anymore. I'm just driving. I'm like, guys, we gotta stop here. Can we take a photo here? And like, can I just draw this real quick? And they're like, dude, you gotta stop. We haven't had dinner yet. But yeah, it's a lot of that, and some of the original kind of like vaquero or like kind of cowboy-esque characters were kind of based off my wife's dad and his siblings. They're like these kind of cowboys working out in the fields, but they also like have very like kind of straight faces and very like strong shoulders. These are guys who just like know how to work, but at the same time, it is a little sad because they weren't really afforded quite the childhood that I feel like I was lucky enough to have, and so they're
Yeah.
very like straight faced. But then you turn that over to these other parts of their life when they're not working, when they're with family, and they're 100% with their family, and they're like 100% partying, drinking way too much tequila, and eating everything, and so dancing.
Yes.
So
So
yeah,
much dancing.
100%. How's your like salsa, bachata, merengue, cumbia, all that?
I mean, I I I I like to dance. I think that's the one Mexi part about me is I was blessed with my Mexican hips, so I do know how to dance. I can learn the steps. My husband like has taught me like some of the steps, or we have this long running joke. So my uncle's last name is Lechuga. So when we were little
Tequila.
visiting, yeah, his last name. So when we were visiting and we were little, he would say, "Come to the Lechuga Academy of Dance. I teach you the dance." And he uses like a silly voice saying it. So I learned to dance from the Lechuga Academy of Dance.
That's awesome. That's
No,
big time. It's a serious school.
it was a serious school. I learned some serious dance moves from the Lechuga Academy of Dance.
That's
Um
awesome.
no, but isn't it okay? Just I just feel very connected with you, like hearing you talk about that, because I think a lot of people, like, if you don't have a friend or a family member or someone who is of Mexican culture, it's like you're missing out on just the some of the best hospitality, friendship, family ever. Because like even though like my family, I haven't seen them in a long time, but we FaceTime and do things. But they will give you the shirt off their back. They will invite you. If they don't know you, that you're part of their family already. And like obviously the food and the culture, and they're always together. They're always doing things together. Other families get
100%.
connected. Every time that I go down there, I feel like I meet a second cousin of a cousin that's my cousin,
Yeah,
kind of a thing. It's just like, okay, wait, how did we get here, point A to point B?
a
It's like,
100%.
and it's so true. It's just like when they're working, but when they're off, and it's all about family, no matter what. And it's true. And as now that I'm married to a Mexican, and obviously having my dad like seeing it, like it's so much more part of my life. And so
Yeah,
hearing you want to that you are representing your wife's culture and her father for that matter in these paintings, and getting to share his story with more people now here in the States and whatnot. That's a really beautiful thing.
yeah, and I that 100% resonates with me. While that's not like my family heritage, I feel really lucky because now it is my family.
Mm-hmm.
Whether that's my blood or not. I every time I'm there, I'll just like we'll be drinking, dancing, doing everything, and I'll step back for a second. I'll look around, I'm like, holy cow! Like so many of my friends and family have never seen anything like this, and maybe we'll never get to experience or see anything like this. And so that's where, like in my head, I'm like, man, I want to share this, and it's just really cool to connect different communities, and it's part of the reason why like I've always enjoyed traveling was I felt like it was like a little cheat code to connecting with people, and language is the same thing. And so to try to dive deeper into my Spanish and stuff like that was just really cool because every time I would go, I would like my Spanish would progress a little further, and all of a sudden I would have this conversation that I wasn't able to have the previous time. And then they'd be like, "Oh, get really excited," and they dive really detailed into stuff. And I'm like, "Whoa, slow down! I'm not there
Too
yet."
fast. Too fast.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I guess like being a white guy growing up in the States, like my ancestry, it obviously goes back to Europe and a lot of like Scottish, Irish, English,
I was
German,
gonna
Dutch.
say, by looking at you, you
I
look
don't,
very like Scottish Irish to me, is what I was gonna pinpoint.
100%. And slight caveat, a couple years ago I got my wife like an ancestry DNA test, and hers was fascinating, and like it was a Christmas gift, and when we got her results, it was amazing. It was like obviously 50% indigenous Mexicana, and then it would be like X amount of Spanish, X amount of Portuguese, X amount of sub-Saharan African, and then like all these random really cool things. And I was like, dude, I don't want to see what mine is. And then she got it from me for Christmas the next year. And I'm like, please, there's got to be something that's like not your basic European white guy. And so we got it back, and I was so excited. I opened it up, and like the list started white, and it just like got whiter as you went along. It was just Irish, Scottish, English, German, Dutch, and there was like a little bit of like Swedish in there, and then it was like the end. I was like something. It was like, nah, the last part was Welsh. So I'm like, all right, cool.
Like, there you go.
Yep.
Mine's very similar to your wife's. I did that, and it's like I have, obviously indigenous North and South America because I have a little bit of Cherokee in me. And
nice.
then I have, Spain Spanish because my grandmother's family's from Spain. And then I have like the top little bit, like a percentage from like North Africa. And then
Yeah.
the other half is a little bit English and then Irish Scottish. Like, so I am like 50-50, Native American, North South America, a little bit of Spanish, and then the other half is all white.
Yeah. Which is funny. Like, I guess, like, for me, I wish we had brought, like, I passed down more culture. And I guess it's a reason why, like, I've really enjoyed diving into my wife's kind of family's culture, because I feel like there were certain traditions or things that we had, but it wasn't really culturally passed down. It was just
No.
kind of like what we made within our family, which I love those traditions and I really appreciate them. But it was like, man, I didn't know much about like our, and it went back as soon as like, one of my great grandparents was in Scotland, and it's like, that's not that far back either,
No.
but unfortunately, I studied kind of the history of New York City for a while when I was in university, and it talked about all these immigrants coming from specifically from Europe to Ellis Island,
Mm-hmm.
and how on their way there they were just kind of preparing themselves to be as American as possible so that they would get accepted and not turned away.
Yeah.
And so if you were like the Schumacher family from Germany, you were changing your family's name to Shoemaker, and you were trying to get your kids to dress more American and all that. And basically, a lot of these families, and this is up until even today, basically all these families would be like, we're in America now, so like we're only going to speak English so that you don't get bullied, so that you fit in, so that we don't stand out.
Yeah.
And I genuinely think one of the coolest things about the United States is that there's every type of person from every country in the world, and there's every language. And I think that was the dark part of our history, to kind of allow these cultures to get pushed to the side, when I think it's these cultures that make the U.S. really special.
Yeah.
So I guess like for us, if and when we have, a kid or kids one day, like we would love to pass down like traditions. I would love to research. I'm trying to do more research about my like Scottish and Irish and English heritage, because I think there are really cool parts of that as well. So I'm like, it would be cool to pass these traditions down, pass names down.
Yeah.
And my wife, she speaks English, Spanish, French, Italian. She's like,
Oh
she's really
man.
smart, and so she's got the Romance languages like on lock. And so we're like, dang, she's got to teach them those languages, and it makes me like feel a little like I need to level up, because I'm not anywhere near her level. So
That's really cool. Word to the wise, when you do name your children, make sure the family's in English, like an American can speak it, say the name, and the families in Mexico in Spanish can say it. It is a
yeah.
problem with my name my entire life. I have a J and then a
Yeah.
double L. So imagine my family who doesn't speak very good English, and they try and say my name. It's Jill every time.
Geez,
So,
geez.
G
Yeah.
G, and they have a really hard time. My husband can say my name, no problem. I don't. Uh,
That's
yeah,
good.
or he says, he goes Jillian, and I'm like, huh. Anyway, but so try and pick a name that both sides of the family can say easily. Is what we've
This
decided after having our kid.
this might be tough, because like she's over there looking at like indigenous Mexicano names and stuff like that, and I'm out here looking at like these basic like historic Scottish Gaelic or Irish Gaelic names, and there's going to be problems on one side or the
The
other. So
other,
I think
yeah.
we've probably just come to face the facts of that.
Yeah. So, okay, so we've talked about her family, and let's can we dial back to your family, because you say
100%.
you grew up in a very creative household. How did your family influence obviously your style, because you dress really well, your photography,
Thank
your
you.
paintings, like how did that evolve for you to be as creative as you are from your side of the family?
Yeah, interestingly enough, I think maybe this is something that culturally was passed down, whether they recognize it or not. My mom's always been like an unbelievable sewer, tailor,
Mm-hmm.
and so she'll tell you she's not. She'll tell you she's not perfect about it. She'll tell you she just researches and figures it out. But like
Foray.
the stuff that she makes is unbelievable. Everything from like she would make like the bedspreads that we used as kids. She would make the suits that we'd wear to church.
Mm-hmm.
Like she was making the majority of our clothes during like early childhood. And so from an early age, she had kind of piqued our interest into that, and we would go to like thrift stores a lot, and like we would find some like suits that we thought had either cool patterns or like cool textures, or we liked the colors, and basically she would teach us how to tailor them to our own body types.
That's so
And
cool.
so it was the type of thing where like we just couldn't have afforded to go buy a nice suit, but we could find a suit that was pretty good quality, and it was close enough to our body type that we could tailor it to us. And then we'd wear it to like a wedding, or we'd wear it to an event or something. And our friends would be like, yo, how are you affording these nice suits? And we're like, they had no idea that we bought this suit for like under $5 or something at Goodwill or something, and then just tailored it to our own body type. But yeah, she taught us how to like sew and tailor clothing. She was always I learned how to drive in a 15 passenger van. So we we were always driving around in a 15 passenger van. Yep. And she would always like see furniture on the side of the road, and if she saw like a wooden dresser that looked like it had like a good bones or good structure to it, she would be like, all right, let's grab it. So we'd grab it, we put it in the back of the van, take it home. She'd like sand it down, distress it, give it new knobs, give it a new finish, and it would look like something that could have potentially been like $1,000+, and it was something that somebody was throwing away. And
Yeah.
so I think like we adopted that creativity and that kind of craftiness from her. And my dad was a, also a really creative writer. He's a preacher, so we're like a big preacher's family, and so he was kind of a creative writer, a really great communicator. And so we were always like, we were like the Von Trapp family singers. My mom would dress us up in all the clothes that she made for us, and we'd have to sing in front of the church. I'm like having flashbacks right now. But yeah, it was just funny. Some of it was like, in the moment you're like, this is cringe, but then after you look back, you're like, this is actually pretty cool. Like, how
Looks
did she
pretty
make all that stuff?
badass.
Yeah, 100%. Um, so yeah, basically I think like this is early digital phone era where everyone kind of had easier accessibility to like taking photos of everyday life, because you didn't have to have a camera. And like, we messed around with like little digital cameras and stuff before, but I think it got a lot easier to take a bunch of photos once phones kind of started having
Yeah.
decent cameras, which now we don't think that they're decent at all. They're like the most pixelated pictures of all time. But at the time it was awesome. And so we would
Mhm.
basically start taking photos of these projects, whether it be like sewing projects or like we were refurbishing some furniture or something like that. And then all of a sudden, our friends started being like, dude, you should write about this kind of stuff. Like we'd like to know more about it. And so we started a blog, back in the day.
As a
And
family?
it was kind of like, there was four of us that started it, four
Okay.
brothers. And so it was like a menswear editorial. And truly the only people blogging at the time were like moms sharing recipes.
Yeah.
And so no one was really doing this. And so we started sharing these projects. And then all of a sudden we started featuring our other friends. Like if this friend was really good at making leather goods, or this other friend was an unbelievable videographer. We started just kind of featuring them and their stories, and then just like capturing what they were doing really creatively. Um, and so it started doing really well. And this was early Instagram era. This was like, I think before Instagram was even sold.
Insta-
This was like,
Inst- Instagram was like around 2011, 2012,
yeah. So this,
2000, somewhere in there, I think.
yeah, is around that time frame. Basically, they had heard, Instagram corporate had heard about our story, and they reached out and they were just like, "Hey, we'd like to put you guys on our suggested users list." So like basically,
That's
would
really
get
cool.
when anyone get like a Instagram account, it would say you should follow these 20 people to get you started, you know. And so they put us on that list, and it got like our editorial account up to like, I don't know, 60,000 followers.
Sheesh.
Yeah, and so we just kind of kept telling those stories, and so we started stepping into the menswear world, and there was no influencer era. No one was paying anybody to wear their clothes or anything like that. But basically, all these brands started saying like, "Hey, we could actually like we could just pay you guys if you guys want to talk about our product or review it or take some cool photos of it." And so we found like a bunch of brands that we really resonated with, or we would reach out to a bunch of brands that we loved and just be like, "Hey, could we make some content for you?" And just like totally not knowing what we were doing. We knew nothing about business, you know, growing up in like a ministry family, you know. So yeah, photography started like embedding itself into our lives, and all of a sudden we were like getting nicer cameras and starting to take a little bit more professional quality photography. And then there was like a bunch of brands that kind of reached out that were like not our style at all. And they're like, "Hey, we'll pay you to do this." And we're like, "Man, it's cool that they want to pay us, but like we
It
don't
doesn't
like
align with you.
yeah, we don't want to do like an ad for like Hot Topic if we're it's not,
It's not
you know,
what you're
our
wearing.
style."
It's not your vibe. Yeah.
So yeah, we like pivoted a little bit, and we're like, you know what, we can't like feature them, but we can develop content for them. And so it kind of turned what we were doing not only into kind of a editorial concept, but into like an agency of sorts.
Oh,
So all of a sudden
cool.
we were kind of developing content for other brands and not just in the menswear world. Um, but yeah, that's kind of what spurred our photography side. And then we just really like, none of us studied photography. I'll have to send you some of my brother's artwork too. Like these guys are unbelievable photographers, writers. It's just cool because I think we all kind of encourage each other and help each other kind of level up. Whether it probably because we're all competing with each other, we like all want to outdo everybody else. But it's like a healthy kind of rivalry, you know.
I think as
Um,
siblings, it's there. I have two sisters, so I totally get it.
yeah, 100%. So yeah, that's what kind of happened there. I think like to answer your question about like the art side, I think like I'd always been really intrigued by art, but I had never really been around people who worked in an artistic capacity, whether it be like painting or even like design, logo branding. We started to step into more of those environments. And I think like there was a time where I had like shot a bunch of campaigns for brands and stuff. And I just felt like for a period that the stuff that I was shooting was going up on their website for a week, or it was going on their social media for like, I don't know, it would pop up there and then they'd post something else the next day, something else. And what you created for them was just like getting washed out by all this other content. And
Yeah.
so it felt like the content that we were creating just didn't have longevity.
Hmm.
And I think that's what like turned my head to be like, man, I would love to create something that people want to know more about or that people want to talk about that lasts longer than
A
an
second.
Instagram post. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's not washed out by so much content. And so I think I kind of feel like life forces you into opportunities that will allow you to be who you're probably supposed to be or who
Yeah.
you would like to be deep down. And when the pandemic happened and kind of we all had to be stuck at home, I was just like, man, I really like want to paint my feelings right now,
Please.
you know? And like genuinely I hadn't, besides like middle school, I hadn't really painted. I would always draw a lot and I felt really like capable with like sketching and stuff like that. Like I always felt good with like pencils and using
Yeah.
pens and stuff like that. but I'd never even like really picked up a paintbrush outside of maybe middle school.
Wow.
And so, right like midway through the pandemic, I just started buying some canvases, and I like honestly, I probably ended up like being the only like young dude who was in Hobby Lobby like every week getting canvases and paintbrushes and all these different pieces of gear that were like totally foreign to me, but I just started doing research and trying to figure it out. And so yeah, it was really cool to take. I feel like we all have this creative perspective, but we portray it differently or we express it differently. And putting paint on paper or canvas felt like really freeing to me, because it was, like I said, it's like I feel like I paint like I dress. Like I feel like these colors and these textures and all this stuff was already in my life, but I never expressed it in this way, you know.
Yep.
So it was just special to do that from a purely like therapeutic sense, right in the middle of the pandemic and feeling like the world is insane and we have no idea what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And then also I did, do you know about The Artist's Way?
The
The
Artist's
Artist's
Way.
Way, yeah, it's a book. It's kind of
Yes.
like a creative course by Julia Cameron, which
Yes.
she's got her own crazy story. She's like the ex-wife of Martin Scorsese, and so like her mind's just like on another level in terms of like inviting people into their own creative self, which there's a lot of people who don't think that they're creative, but we all have creativity inside of us.
Yeah.
And so we did this, like, I think it was a 12-week course. Basically, she would have these reading excerpts, and then we'd like basically have a Zoom meeting, as we all did. On like Wednesdays, we'd meet up with friends, have like a cocktail, and talk about what we read that week. And then also she would have you do what's called morning pages. And morning pages essentially was just like 3 pages of longhand writing, right when you wake up, before you even look at your phone or do anything. You're just emptying your mind onto paper.
Yeah.
And basically, like at first 3 pages was really difficult. And I was like, dude, what am I going to write like 3 pages about right when I wake up, you know? And she literally would say, if you don't have anything to write about, just write, I don't have anything to write about, for 3 pages. And it's just the practice of doing it and empty. And maybe like some days you're really happy and inspired, and some days I was just like, I like hate the pandemic right now, and this really sucks, and I just want to go outside, and like, but it's really hot outside, or I can't go to the park or whatever. And so like we just like start expressing these things, and then after doing it for so many weeks, I like couldn't stop writing, and like 3 pages wasn't enough, you know. But it was just developing that routine, and after you would empty your mind onto 3 pages, after that, I felt like my mind was relieved, and I had the capacity to have important conversations, or I had the capacity to be a lot more creative, because there was so much crap in my mind that was like keeping me from just thinking clearly. And so that was just such a cool practice that I've developed through that program, and I've been inconsistent with it over the last little bit, but even there will be times where like I need to do this morning, and then grab coffee, go sit down, and then we're doing that, you know, and you just feel like you can approach the day a lot healthier. And any bits of creativity you feel like are not blocked. So yeah, it basically just dove into art from that. She would have you write your morning pages, and then do one other practice called artist dates. And this would be like once a week. She would just say, your inner artist is like a child that needs to be nurtured, you know? And so essentially, if you don't do anything for your creative self, you're not growing the relationship. It's not going to grow. Something as simple as like, when we could go back to museums, it's like, go to a museum by yourself, or like rearrange the books on your bookshelf, or go draw something, or, you know, go pot plants, like garden. And it would just be like all these random things that didn't feel like a date or something, but like when you did them, you're like, oh, it was kind of fulfilling, you know? But it's so yeah, just forced intentionality in those creative aspects of your life, and then paired with her reading, like I started painting more. And yeah, it's been fun to feel like the beginning, and even still, there's so many technical things that I have no idea about. And I'm learning
I'm
new
still
techniques
learning.
and about new brushes and about paints and mixing and all this stuff that's like mind-boggling how much information is actually out there for us. So it's cool to experience that, and humbling to be like, no matter how successful you are, there's so much to learn.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it keeps you at a good place. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So in it, from a writing standpoint, like I used to do that all the time. My writing teachers was like, write every day. And I've gotten out of the habit of it, and I miss it. I crave it because it's just like, oh, I have so many things. But, from an artist standpoint, it's really interesting because like I went to art classes forever, and I'm still learning new mediums by watching people, by going to art shows and looking at different art and whatnot, going, how are they doing that, what are they doing? And like my new favorite thing, it's not a new thing but it's new to me, is the paint markers. Love them. I've never
Yeah, they're
used them
awesome.
before. Those are
Yeah,
amazing. I'm like,
freaking
yes.
cool.
And my other favorite thing is like I've always wanted to learn to paint with oil, like properly paint with oil, but I'm like, I don't have that time. I don't have that kind of time. So I
Yeah, same.
found, and I was getting for a while there, in the past several years ago, I was getting really into encaustic painting, which is painting with hot wax. But I found the RF pigment sticks, which is like, it's an oil wax
Yeah,
stick, and it's like the consistency of like a lipstick or a chapstick or something. So it's like painting with oil, but without all the rules. And it's
yeah,
and you
exactly.
can use it with acrylic, and it's just like, unless you get unleashed into an art store and you're like, where do I go? What do I pick up? And you're just like, you want to try a little bit of everything. And so it's just like, that's why I have a massive drawer cabinet over here that I designed and my husband and I built, and each drawer is a completely different medium of things that I've collected over the years. So
That's
it's just
awesome.
like, of like all this trial and error. Oh, I really like this, and sometimes I'll bring it out and like use different things on different paintings just depending on my mood. But like, as you've been discovering this, what are some of your favorite mediums now that you like working with?
This is it's kind of crazy because I have fallen into a lot of things on accident. But like all of a sudden you realize what the possibilities are. On the Oh, I'm glad you mentioned those, like the pastel sticks, because those are like, I'm about to purchase a bunch of those, and literally a bunch of friends use them, and I've never used them, and they look awesome. And so I'm about to dive into those, and I'm really stoked about it. I do mainly acrylic on canvas, occasionally on paper. I use a lot of I bought a ton of cotton canvas and linen canvas in Mexico.
Mhm.
That was like Mexican cotton and linen.
Mhm.
And it's cool to kind of have that local aspect too.
Yeah.
Because I was in Chapultepec, which is like it's basically the Central Park of Mexico City. And so we were out there, and I basically took some of the soil like back in like a little container to the apartment, and like ended up experimenting like mixing some of the dirt with some of the acrylic paint, and then like adding that onto the local canvas, and all of a sudden you have this piece where like they had a canvas that was from there. They had this soil that was built into the acrylic paint, and so whoever bought that, whether that was somebody in the States or somebody in Mexico, they had a piece of Mexico City with them, you know.
That's really
and
cool.
and it's just it's amazing that like it wasn't just for the vibe, but also it was like for kind of the meaning of it, you know.
Mhm.
um so yeah, I would say there was also another time where like I literally bumped my coffee. I drink a lot of coffee.
Yes.
I bumped my coffee onto a canvas that I was like really trying to experiment a different concept with. And I was like, I looked at it and oh shoot, let's start wiping it up. And I'm like, actually, the coffee, when I like wiped it around, kind of had the tone that I was looking to make. And I ended up just like dumping the rest of my coffee on top of it and just like scraping it
Moving
across the
around.
canvas, you know? And so it's, it's like funny because on a technical side, I'd like to have all this gear that might be more expensive or these millions of little pieces that I think in certain moments would give me an opportunity to create something uniquely, or very specifically for that. But then at the same time, it's like, dude, I
You
do
get
want to mix in the soil. I want to mess with the coffee. I want to, do something, set this on fire for a second. Like,
Yeah, right.
so,
So fun thing. So where I grew up in Central Oregon, and there actually was a painter locally, to Bend, who would specifically paint with coffee and beer on paper, and like the different types of beer and like coffee grounds, it would saturate different in the paper and get like
huh,
different context. So there's a thing. And then one time I was painting on linen. I was getting back into painting, and I was using charcoal and stuff, and I needed a color, and I think I was drinking red wine, and I accidentally dipped my brush in I had a little bit too much probably. Instead of dipping it in my water, I dipped it in my wine, and I started painting, and then that I was kind of doing like a self-portrait, and the wine dipped in the brush on the linen became my hair, because it was just a rich
that's
enough
awesome.
color. And then I think another night I was still working on that same painting. I needed a little bit more of a saturation color for like the background. It was like pillows, and I was drinking white wine. I was like, oh, what does white wine do on the on the linen? And so, and I have used also another thing, food that has color to it, like beets or
Oh,
blueberries.
totally.
It works, people. I think I
That's
drew a
awesome.
whole. I was at a restaurant once, and I was sitting at the bar by myself eating like a beet salad, and like the a beet like fell on my sketchbook because I was sketching, and it left a cool mark, and I was like, oh sweet. And so I'm sitting there at the bar like with my beet salad, using like a beet that dropped, like drawing on my sketchbook with it. So I'm pretty sure the people are like, what are you doing? I was like, I'm making art. Leave me alone.
That's awesome. No, a few years ago, we went for our anniversary, we went to Puyol, which, you know about Puyol? Like Enrique
Mm-mm.
Olvera. This guy is like, a pretty iconic Mexican chef. I mean, he has, Puyol has been like basically in the top 50 restaurants in the world for the last like 10 years.
Oh,
Um,
cool.
he also has a restaurant in New York and a couple other locations, but he just has like um, this innovative just mentality where he is using things that are so specifically seasonal in very specific regions, and he's using that to tell a story about that region, and he's just creating these dishes that are unbelievable. And so the restaurant has definitely become like, it's a more bougie spot in Mexico City for sure, and it is typically tourists who are going there. It honestly was an amazing experience, and I definitely loved it. The architecture and the art and the food was spectacular, and the staff is all
Yeah,
awesome, and they're like, they can explain everything to you in English, Spanish, French, whatever.
that's really
But
cool.
basically, he has his like most popular dish. He was on Chef's Table, and he expressed this dish as like it's called a mole madre, and basically he
Hmm.
has this dark mole that he has been adding to for like basically 5 years or so. Don't
Yeah.
quote me on the exact date, but he just keeps adding frijoles, chiles, chocolate. He's just adding all these different things to it, and it's so complex, but it is absolutely delicious. And then he puts this newer like red mole in the middle, and the plate just looks like a target with like the
Yeah.
dark mole on the outside, the red mole in the middle. I'm like eating this mole, and I'm dipping the tortillas in there, and I'm just like, it's unbelievable. It's absolutely delicious. And I like basically brushed the tortilla like a certain way, and I was like, yo, that's kind of cool. And while everyone's out there like taking their photos and just being like, this is one of the most amazing dishes I've ever had, I'm over there like drawing in the mole with like a tortilla, and I'm like drawing these like cowboy characters and stuff, and I'm like, I am a child, 100%.
No, I
Uh,
think that's really cool because, I see chefs as being artists. And I
yeah,
think that, like, your experiences that you've had, and then being a foodie and going to these places, but then also having the travel and the whatnot, and your style and the blog and everything, like with your brothers, it's all it's all artistic. and it's gonna come through in your art as you continue to grow as an artist. And I'm actually
Right.
really excited to continue to see you grow as an artist and experience with these new things. And maybe, you never know, if I find a way to preserve food on a canvas without it molding, if
Yeah,
anyone wants to try and figure that
there's
out for
something
us.
there. There's something there.
I mean, like, it could, you never know. I'm putting it out there, people. I'm putting
A
it out
hundred
there.
percent. 100%.
But no, I think it's really, really cool that you have all of this inspiration and continue to, find it in the mole, in the tortillas, in the spreads. And I do that. I find I'm just right there with you. Like, right now I'm working on a piece right now that's inspired by whiskey from my grandfather, because of whiskey that we drank together,
Love it.
so it's just like
Yeah.
you can find that those unique inspirations, from anywhere.
Yeah, totally. I have a buddy who he lives in Guadalajara, and his architecture is unreal, and he's one of the more like prominent architects, around Mexico, and his style is just a really cool meshing of like past Mexico and like modern Mexico. And
Yeah.
so the style is just super cool. Um but he basically expressed it to me that there is art that is meant for a space. It's purely
Ooh,
aesthetic. And then there's art that is like storied art, and it's like narrative driven art. And that art doesn't always fit in every space.
oh no.
Maybe it could, depending on the style. But he's like, you can, and no shame to anyone who makes art even just for vibes, or that that they have if you have a bunch of interior design friends, I think it's awesome, and they are basically pitching your art for you, and I think it's such a cool way to get your art out there and into really cool spaces too. um but at the same time, I like want to distinguish that I'm not making art for everyone else or for their spaces, that like I'm making art because I've experienced these things and I want to express these ideas.
Yeah.
um and then I had kind of a business mentor be like, because I told him, I was like, this was I don't know, a couple of years ago, and I told him, I was like, man, I just feel like I'm not like, it's probably my marketing, I don't know, I just haven't really been selling as much as I would like to. And he's like, well, he's like, sometimes you need to make the art, that the aesthetic art, to fund your narrative driven like passion art too. So he's like, if you don't want to do that stuff as all of your art, make some of it that would sell to the masses maybe. He's like, you're not selling out, it's enabling you to create the art that you really want to create.
That's a
um
perfect point.
and so there's no perfect way about doing it, and no one's selling out if they only make that aesthetic art.
You're still
But it's
making
also
art.
100%. But it's also really cool to have the opportunity to share a story, or to share an idea, that or share something that's just really sentimental to you.
Yeah.
Um, so
That's all my
that's my
stuff
goal.
is.
Yeah,
That's all my art is story driven, 100%. And so I know for 100% fact that my art is not for everyone. And I've, at first, like when I was starting to create, I was bummed. Like, why aren't people understanding this? But it's just like you will eventually find your people, your tribe, your collectors that are going to be like, this is the coolest thing ever. I connect to this so much. It reminds me of XYZ. I understand, I see your story. Um and then they're going to jump on board 100%, you know.
yeah,
And
totally.
it's time. And you've been doing art, painting. You've been doing art your whole life. But you've been painting for only almost 4 years now, right? You're coming in your
Yeah,
fourth year. Yeah, so it's
yeah,
just
and
like
yeah, it's crazy.
you have so much to look forward to. And like, especially being here in Dallas, that because I've lived, East Coast, you've lived New York, I've lived Southern California, I've lived Oregon, I've lived so many places. And I have recently discovered that the art world here in Dallas is probably one of the friendliest art communities that I've
Totally.
ever experienced.
Yeah,
So I will make sure to help introduce you to people, and obviously we need to hang out.
For
Um,
sure. 100%. I appreciate
and
that. Thank you.
yeah, and because your art is really, really special. But yeah, so where can our audience find your work if they want to right now? Is it out anywhere or is it just purely website right now?
Yeah, so currently I am working on a couple different collections. My art isn't showcased anywhere at the moment other than social media and my website. I would say the best way to find out about my art, and whether that's, you know, uh, just asking more information in terms of like dimensions, the medium, the price points and stuff like that, is just to follow along on social media. I'm currently
Hmm.
revamping kind of e-commerce and what that's supposed to look like on my website and stuff like that. And yeah, hopefully here soon we'll have, I'm in some fun talks with some people who hopefully will be able to showcase my art in some appropriate spaces here shortly. So I'll keep you updated on that.
Okay, cool. Yeah, and if you do, I'll make sure to include it in the show notes, and I'll obviously be able to help push it for you. So, everyone, if you're listening, I'll make sure to include Zach's website and his Instagram, and any of the works we chatted about and inspiration stuff. So thank you again, Zach, for coming on to the website. Website. I can't even speak. The podcast today. It's been a long
Thank you
day.
for having me. No,
Yeah.
I'm super grateful to be here. Super fun having a talk with you, and look forward to hanging again soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you very much. And I'm sure our audience will enjoy this episode as much as I have. So
Awesome.
thanks.
Thank you.
All right. And that, my friends, wraps up another colorful episode of The Artist Stoop. A huge thank you to our incredible guests for sharing their art and stories. If you enjoyed the conversation as much as I did, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss out on the next Stoop chat. And don't forget to spread the love. Share your favorite episodes with fellow art enthusiasts, and let's build this community together. Connect with us on social media at Jguze Studio and Jillian Zepeda Art for behind-the-scene peeks, artist spotlights, and a sneak peek at my own art. Until next time, stay inspired, stay curious, and keep that creative fire burning. This is Jillian Zepeda signing off from the Artist Stoop. And remember, the world is your canvas, so paint it vividly.